Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex
and Eva.
And we're so excited. Get your seatbelt on. We've had some great episodes here recently.
We have. We kind of got in a groove. We figured it out.
Yeah.
We figured out what we want to talk about. So
we have.
Excited.
And we've talked about some things that are a little controversial.
They need to be talked about.
They do need to be talked about. And they're not necessarily controversial. They just have tension.
Or taboo.
Yeah, or taboo.
Episode, yeah.
Now I think today may be a little controversial.
I think so too. We're talking about current events.
Yes, because it is the first this is the first one of the year, right?
No.
Or did we post one
we
last?
posted one last week.
Okay.
But it is the first one we recorded in the new year.
Yes, it's the first one we recorded in the new year.
Anyway, so excited. So we're talking about current events, but specifically how our generation is viewing them and how as Christians we should be viewing them and different things like that. And so there's some big ones, everything happening in the month of January.
You actually picked these, right?
I did.
You said, Dad, hey, can we talk about these? And I'm like, wow, that's a wide variety of topics. But I'm like,
events.
okay.
It's what's in the news cycle right now.
It is what's in the news.
It's what people see on their social media and on their news and all those things. So the topics we are talking about, we are talking about Trump, of course, because obviously inauguration, all those things. He's constantly in the news cycle. So how our generations are viewing them. And we're going to talk about the Luigi Mangeone, the CEO killer. He killed he's suspected of killing the United Healthcare CEO.
Yes.
And then the terrorism attack in NOLA. And so those are the three things that are in the news right now, and I think our generations have very, very, very different approaches to all three of those. And so I was like, let's talk about them because I haven't heard your side of it, you haven't heard mine, and I think it's interesting.
I haven't, so this ought to be good. We don't ever rehearse our podcast. We do kind of talk through them. Hey, what are the main topics? Is there any major point that you want to discuss?
Yep.
But we don't rehearse. We don't have notes. We have a few. I just write a few things.
I have 2 things written on a piece of paper, and one of them is just the pronunciation of Luigi Mangeone's name.
All right. Well, so for the benefit of our listeners and myself, go. The first topic is President-elect Trump and the inauguration.
Oh.
What's on your mind, teenager?
So
daughter.
I don't have that big of an issue with him. I was not too happy with either of the political candidates for our election, but you know what? I went with who aligned more with my values. That being said, my generation hates him. Oh my gosh. So quite a few of my friends posted after election day, if you voted for Trump, don't ever talk to me again, unfollow me. You don't deserve to be my friend. Like all those things. If you can't support my reproductive rights, all these things, then you don't deserve to have a place in my life. Okay. The big one I just saw last night, which actually sparked this whole idea, was Brittany Mahomes, right? Patrick Mahomes' wife.
City Chiefs.
Yep. She liked a post by Trump and she gave some money. Okay, great. That's what falls under her morals, under her values, all those things. That's
her prerogative.
Yeah, that's what they're allowed to do as Americans, is who they choose to vote for. Okay.
Yep.
So Taylor endorsed Kamala Harris. Okay. And so fans were like, oh, Taylor should never interact with Brittany again. Well, Travis and Patrick are best friends. Of course they're going to interact in things. And so at the recent Kansas City Chiefs game, Taylor hugged Brittany Mahomes, and it went viral of people saying, I'm so physically sick right now. Somebody that I, looked up to or that I trusted to make the right decision is supporting somebody who's actively trying to take things away from me. And all of these things, how can I ever support someone who allows people like that in their life? And people are like, well, you're the problem. Like the comments of people my own age were like, well, you're the problem. You're not realizing that as Americans, we can have different beliefs. We're not all forced to have the same kind. We can have different beliefs and different mindsets and different values and different people we vote for. And you can still be friends or at least civil with other people. And somebody said, I would die before ever being friends with someone who was actively trying to take away my rights or something. And somebody was like, well, then just don't make decisions that are going to lead to that or something. And It was like this whole thing of people hating on each other. And it gets blown out of proportion. Ross Lynch, he was a former Disney Channel star. It was rumored, not even confirmed, rumored that he voted for Trump, and his comment sections for years back were just flooded with comments saying, please tell me it isn't true. Please tell me it isn't true. I can't support you if it is true, and things like that. And it was just like, sometimes you have to separate the person from the art, different things like that. And I'm like, guys, as Americans, we're allowed to make different decisions. And so that was like a huge thing. People on the media. Now, that is not the entirety of my generation. It's just the ones that are generally more prominent on the media. You know, the ones that are going viral, the ones that are more outspoken, things like that usually fall on the different party than my side. But like a lot of my classmates, right, who do fall, like, you know, like Trump and things like that, they just don't have social media. So there's not a platform for them to say it. So the people that have the platform, right, they're the ones most outspoken. And it's just sad because, you know, there is no civility in it. They're attacking each other. They're hating each other. One of my friend's dads said that people who'd voted for Trump should die, like things like that. It was just interesting. It's separating our country. We're all Americans at the end of the day. We're all citizens of America, and no matter who's in power, they're still going to be trying to better America. It may be on different like policies and things, but there is still a grand scheme of things of trying to better America and protect America and, you know, remove it from political conflict that it shouldn't be in and things like that. And people are forgetting that, and they're becoming loyal to a party, not to their nation. And so I think it's just really sad to see that in the media.
I think you're right. And I'm grateful that you see the problem with that. Didn't know that you had read through all that recently. And there's so many things to unpack, Eva, in what you just said.
Just pick some. You don't have to go through all of them.
Well,
I'm just talking about how my generation's.
Well, I know. And I was actually taking some notes as you were talking. I just wrote down some key words. One of the things you said was platform and influencers. And that's actually part of the problem in this social media environment. You have these platforms where people, through what, I don't even understand how all that works, how somebody becomes a social media influencer and all of a sudden you've got 1 million followers or even 15, 20 million followers. And I know some of that is artists. I get it. Some of it's professional athletes. Some of it's politicians. But people that came from, let me just say it, ordinary, common backgrounds and don't necessarily have any particular expertise other than they just decided, hey, they want to become a social media influencer and they become content developers. That's really what happens. And so
they're going to say things that are going to spark a debate in the comments. Because the more comments they get, the more views they get. And it's just a grand spiral thing. Sometimes people, like a big trend, and I'm gonna not, I cut you off, but it's to explain something really quickly. When you're getting
at least you recognized you cut me off, but go ahead.
But you said you don't understand it. Well, one thing they do and use their platform is they'll do really random things in it. And so if you ever see somebody like restocking my kitchen, they'll have like a shoe in their refrigerator, or they'll have like, you know, a pair of clothes hanging above their sink, because the people in the comments are going, well, why is there this in your sink? And it's causing discussion. So the more out of the ordinary they are, but not so out of the ordinary people deem them weird, the more attention they get. And so the more controversial they can be.
Exactly. And you and I have talked about that. I listen to both conservative and liberal talk radio for the exact reasons that you started the podcast off with. I think that I know we live in the most divisive, dysfunctional society ever, full of discord, and it's full of the media. So one of the things I have started doing is I listen to both sides because I'm just curious. How far 180 degrees out are these opinions, even in terms of trying to determine what factual news is. But one of the really interesting things that I listened to during the election, right before the election, was liberal talk radio was talking about the more attention that the media gave Trump, the seemingly better off that it played into his hands because of some of the outrageous stuff. Let's face it, he does some outrageous stuff. He says some outrageous stuff.
It's the media's eyes on him, and then they go and look into his policy, because he'll say something random and people want to fact check him to try and prove him wrong, and then they go, actually. And so it did work out better for him. And so they both had really
the garbage truck thing. Right?
They both were so smart with their media, with Kamala, with all of the endorsements, right? Which I don't entirely agree with. purely because of the fact that so many people idolize these artists. And then when they go, I think you should vote for whoever you want, but I'm voting for this person, they're going to go, well, I want to be like, Taylor Swift, or I want to be like so-and-so, and they're going to vote for her.
Right.
And things like that. And it removes that individual thought behind it. Now, it's different for some people, but I just think that the endorsement thing, I think Trump did it in a way that allowed people to still come to their own conclusions, where he, would say something and he wasn't like getting all these massive endorsements and things like that on all of the celebrities at his rallies. And there still were, but it wasn't like,
sure.
And so I think he did a good way of leaving room for people to still come to their own conclusions and do their own research rather than just saying, let's use the biggest stars in the world. But I think that's just the times. And that's something we have to accept, is that these artists who have this massive platform are going to use their voice how they think it should be best used. And
they are.
Yep.
And I just wrote down another key phrase that you just said, individual thought.
Yep.
You cannot lose your individual thought in this social media platform-based influencers that we have.
Yep.
And I think that's so easy for that to happen,
to
that we just
generation.
you just kind of go with the flow, and you're like, well, I admire this person. I love their art. I love them as an athlete, as a business person, whatever it is. And if they think this way, well, surely that's the correct way. And that's the way I'm going to think. I'm going to vote. I'm going to act, all of these things. But it removes individual responsibility for individual thought to basically analyze and determine facts on your own.
Yep.
All of us have an individual responsibility to engage in the political process, in civic duties, all of these things. And so it is a fascinating environment that we find ourselves in.
So how is your generation approaching?
Well, again, I'm so glad. I've said this before. I miss your grandfather, but I'm glad he's not here to see this, because his generation specifically would be flabbergasted at what they see. And I'm kind of in the middle, so to speak, because again, I have the benefit. I have a teenager. You keep me grounded in terms of current events and things that are happening, these different perspectives. But you already know this. Mm-hmm. Some of these things are principle based, and you're not going to move me or my generation off of the way that we approach civic responsibility, corporate responsibility, because there's the ticket. Hey, America's the greatest country in the world. Mm-hmm. It's people are still giving their life trying to get here. Yep. Well, why is that? Because we offer more individual freedom than any other country in the world. Yep. But here's what we've always taught our citizens. That individual freedom comes with a corporate responsibility. Yep. You cannot, we've tried to export freedom throughout the world. Yep. Well, here's one of the challenges in that. You can't export freedom if people are not willing to accept the responsibilities and the obligations that go with it. And so I'm an American citizen, but that doesn't mean I get to get up every day. I get to do what I want to do, say what I want to say, think what I want to think. That I think that concept is becoming a little bit too popular about, hey, it's all about the individual. And I'm sorry, that's not the case.
But we should be working as a group for the betterment of our country.
For the betterment of our country,
rather than just being
our
100
community.
million individual parts.
Exactly. So that's kind of where my generation falls in that. I love individual freedom, but there is no... To an extent, there is no individual freedom without corporate responsibility.
Well, what does corporate responsibility mean?
Well, it means that I have an obligation. You know, the old saying, hey, I'm not my brother's keeper. Yep. Well, I got news for you. You are your brother's keeper. I'm responsible. I can't fix everything, but when I see
you can be not part of the problem.
Yes, but I can't just turn a blind eye to everything in my community, the problems in my community. We can throw 50 different ones out, but let me just throw some out. Homelessness. Yeah. Well, we have a home. Yep. We're sitting it's cold today in Alabama, which is unusual. It's below freezing, but we have a nice warm home. Well, I'm not worried about homelessness. No, it's part of my corporate and civic responsibility. I have to be concerned concerned because there's people out there living under a bridge, and sometimes you get the counter argument, well, they made that choice. No, not necessarily. Sometimes they made the choice, but not always. And so we have this is a fact.
Yeah.
We have a lack of affordable housing, especially in urban areas in this country.
Yep.
Well, guess what? I can't turn a blind eye to that as an individual. I have a corporate responsibility as an American to think about that, that I have fellow citizens that are on the street that don't have housing, they don't have enough food, they don't have clothing. That is my responsibility, and I can't turn a blind eye to it. And you can tell I'm getting passionate about it because I've got a double whammy. I'm a pastor too, so I care about those things. But as a citizen, I cannot turn a blind eye to my brother. And so to that age-old saying, I would say, yes, I am. I am my brother's keeper. And that's kind of one of the differences between our generations, because I see a lot. You're going to talk about a statistic here in a minute.
That blows me away.
Yeah, a lot of individuality in your generation, ages what, 18 to
29.
29. Okay.
So we're going to move on now to Luigi Mangeone, the CEO, alleged CEO killer. He has pled not guilty. So 41% of people 18 to 29, so Gen Z, think that the murder of the United Healthcare CEO was acceptable or somewhat acceptable. That is almost 50% of people. That's almost like this, what, 2 and 5 out of 5 people agree that, 2 out of 5
2 out of 5 is 40%.
Yeah.
What was the actual percentage?
41.
41. So 2 out of 5.
2 out of 5 people between 18 to 29 think that Luigi Mangeone's alleged killing of the United Healthcare CEO was justified. And long story short, right, he has become a thirst trap. He has become the most, but he has become like an idolized man on the internet. People are constantly like, he's not guilty, let him go. There's fan pages. If you search his name on Instagram, about 15 fan pages pop up, and it's just thirst traps and he should be free and all these things.
Okay, define thirst traps.
How do I describe it?
That's the first time I've ever heard
You've
that
never
term.
heard of
No,
that? Okay,
I've never heard
it's like,
that term.
so you know how like the term like you're thirsting after someone?
Yeah.
So it's like a thirst trap is like a sexual
It's
video or something like not it's like scandalous but not really like actually sexual.
Okay.
It happens a lot with celebrities, like it'll be like them shirtless and it'll be like flashing lights and music and all this. So yeah.
The tourist trap.
Yeah, kind of.
On the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know where else this happened recently? The Menendez brothers, right? They spent like 20 years in prison for killing their parents.
Yep.
And my generation rallied behind trying to get them free. They did nothing wrong. They were thirsting after them. All of these things. It happens all the time with people. But like the high profile trials, right? So nobody's doing this with like Diddy and all of these things, right? They actually want justice for that. But it's these high profile, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, these things, they've involved people in matters that really shouldn't have the public opinion on them. There's actually speculation right now that the court may not be able to give him a juror trial because of how many people are thirsting after him and want him free. And they don't think they could get an unbiased trial with jurors because of that's like just something that's I've seen multiple headlines about or specifically they would have to go with the older generations in it, and that they would not have to like 29, like they wouldn't be able to have anybody under 30 in it because of the statistic and things like that. And it's just so it's sad because murder is not right in any way, shape, or form. And so
it is sad.
Yeah.
But to you,
go ahead.
No. There's so much I could say about that. Yeah. I'm like, I really want to go Gen Z. Are you kidding me? Really?
Yep.
Okay. So you, as a Gen Zer,
I think he should be tried, and I think there's enough evidence supporting it. The only thing they are doubting about is the fact that they really never had proof that it was his face on the cameras at like the McDonald's or something. But I'm like, there's like I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I'm like, it's not right. Like, he should be tried, and he's pled not guilty, and so he should be tried.
Okay. All right. But let me stop you right there. That's interesting, but that's outside let's forget whether he's actually guilty or not, and the facial recognition, all that stuff.
Yeah.
2 out of 5 are saying if he did, that it was somewhat justified.
Or completely acceptable.
Yeah, and completely acceptable. And so we could remove him and say, hey, it wasn't him, it was someone else.
But they would still find it
whoever did it, they would say 2 out of 5 somewhat justified.
Actually, though, I think if it was someone who wasn't attractive that had done it, I think people would be like, what a terrible person. I think people don't like the fact that I think they like the fact that it was a private healthcare CEO, but I think a big rally behind it is just the fact that people find him attractive, right?
See, again, let me
so
say
shallow.
what I'm thinking.
Are you serious?
You have got
But I
to
think
be kidding.
if it was somebody who wasn't mentally stable, wasn't attractive, wasn't fit, and wasn't smart, I don't think it would have nearly as much. I don't think it would have been a national trial, or national popularity like it would be. I think it would have remained in its state.
Okay, well, that's a sad commentary, not only on Gen Z, but anybody. Let's remove the specific generations from it. Anybody that would think that, and I know you don't really like it when I mention books.
No, go for
it. But I'm not promoting books, but I'm always reading a book. Well, the one I'm currently reading is called The Coddling of the American Mind. And it does a survey on what's happening on a lot of our college campuses in terms of creating this false notion of a safe place, and the definition of a safe place being you can't disagree with me, and you can't present anything that doesn't align with my personal beliefs because it makes me feel uncomfortable.
You can be different as long as you don't upset me,
exactly.
of thing.
And so this is kind of intertwined with what I'm reading in the book with what's happening in this demonstration in this particular survey of these results.
And that came from Fox News. It's not like just some statistic. It's
Thank you for saying that. I was going to ask you, hey, where'd you get the statistic from?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it is 41% of voters ages 18 through 29. So American citizens 18 through 29 said it was acceptable. And I 100% stand behind the fact that if he wasn't attractive, if he wasn't an Ivy League graduate, he didn't come from a rich northern family, things like that, nobody would care. I think it's because people are thirsting after him.
That's an absolute shame and an embarrassment to the
intelligence.
Not only the intelligence, just the state of our culture. So anyway, but let me say this before we leave that, though. You can even peel that onion back further. What we're talking about is forget the individuals, and you can't because you have a murder victim here, but let's take the faces and the names out of it. The general premise is that we have 40% of a generational category that says that it is okay to determine on your own what the acceptable method is or motive is for murder.
Well, there's a reason murder
instead of
is
making
just wrong.
the absolute truth that murder is wrong, and this is a big topic. We may need to do a whole separate episode on this. Absolute truth. I know you've heard this. Absolute truth versus relative truth. Well, what we're creating with this scenario is relative truth, and that is dangerous because
100%.
the relative truth says the truth changes based on the scenario that you present me, and that is a slippery slope.
Well, it's like what I was talking about with you and with my friend. Morality has become something that's objective to the state of the people, and it's not something that or subjective. It's not something that is a baseline anymore, because there's a reason that murder is wrong. There is no reason except in self-defense, which this was not a case of that, that it was right. And so the fact that people are in their own moral, on their own side of things, when their own worldviews are saying, I think it's all right. It's like, where does that line cross? There's a reason there's this baseline of all murder is wrong. It's not some murder is wrong, but only in situations where the majority agrees, because then that's unfair to the people on the stand, because now it's relying on not on the law, something that's there to protect them, but it's now on the individual morality of the people. And so I think that would be a fantastic topic to talk about.
We need to come back to that, because here's the thing about absolute truth. It's constant. It's objective. It doesn't have favorites. And it will prevail in the end. Truth is always going to prevail. But the lies will fade to the side. You and I have always talked about that. Eventually, the truth is going to come out in 100%. All of these scenarios. So anyway, all right.
Final topic.
Note to self. Next, not necessarily the next one, but
we get
future.
Some good episodes.
We do have we got some great ones lined up. So, but that's just another one to add to it. All right. So what else?
The terrorism attack in NOLA. So, I'm going to start real quick.
Okay.
It's, I'm really mad at my generation for this one, okay?
Okay.
So, alongside of it, right, there was a Cybertruck that blew up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So.
Yeah, but the Cybertruck was in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so I'm saying like alongside the same day, right? Things like that, okay?
All right.
So, different location, okay? So, there's this terrorism attack that happens on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, okay? Then there is a Cybertruck that blows up in Las Vegas, okay? People are blaming Trump. How? Well, first off, he's coming into power. People are like, they're trying to make a statement, things like that. 2, Elon Musk. They're like, well, this is only happening because, all these things. If Trump had not put Elon Musk on his on his staff, all these things. So something that should be about, well, let's, the protection and safety of the people, it's become on a direct attack of the president rising. I don't know the proper word for it.
Yeah.
Things like that.
We politicize it.
Yeah.
We tend to do that
like,
with
rather
everything.
Than being like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. That happened in the busiest place in New Orleans on the busiest night of the year probably. And things like that. It's immediately going to, this is all our, new president's fault and things like that. And I'm like, guys, people died. Yeah. Don't make it about politics until, and this is going to sound so insensitive, but like, let's close the case and get people buried in the ground before we start speculating about it. Like the fact that it was immediately in the media, my generation, blaming it on other people. They didn't want to call it terrorism at first, things like that. And I'm like, guys, they're calling it an inside attack, things like this. I'm like, guys, use your brains. You have to go to school for a reason. It isn't doing anything much for you right now. But things like that. And so I'm like, it's so heartbreaking to see like the insensitivity about it.
Yep. And I don't even have to write that one down, but I love the word you just used, insensitivity, which is exactly what that is. Anytime we seize on a catastrophe to politicize it in any way, it dishonors the dead, those that have lost their lives. Yeah.
They made them all political about both of the hurricanes that hit recently.
And that's what I want to say. Hold up a second.
I will.
New Orleans, thank you. Our prayers and our thoughts 100%. Are with the people of New Orleans. I've only been to New Orleans probably about a half a dozen times over the years, but I think that New Orleans sometimes gets a bad rap,
it does.
Because of some of the crime, maybe even some of the, cultural influences. I'm specifically talking about voodoo. It gets, that kind of
I have a
vibe.
friend from New Orleans.
But here's the thing. If you look at New Orleans from a architectural standpoint, beautiful. Love it. If you look at it from a cultural perspective, beautiful history. If you look at it from the people, I love Cajuns. Spent 3 years in Louisiana, got a degree at LSU, and loved going on Friday nights to the Catfish Cabin down in DeRidder, Louisiana. But back to New Orleans. New Orleans is beautiful as far as the architecture, the cuisine. If you haven't had oysters in New Orleans, you haven't lived. I mean, it's just a really, really neat city. And so anyway, our prayers, our thoughts are with the city, because I know I read an article this morning that someone just wrote a commentary. They said this one feels different for whatever reason. And I just scanned it real quick. And I thought, well, what do you mean it feels different? And they were just talking about, hey, we've been through Katrina. We've been through several other disasters. We've been through high crime rates. And then all of a sudden you have this. And this is just not something that we expected to have in our city. And it just feels different. And I feel like I can relate to that. And I am so sorry that they're going through this at this particular point.
Like a nature thing. It wasn't just a direct relation to their economics and the urbanization of the city. No, it was a direct attack on it. And that's just, it's sad. And I hate that the media is portraying it anything differently than what it is, which is a tragedy.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I've got, you just, when you're older like I am, I've always told people, hey, just hang around. Wait a minute, things will change. And one of the examples I've always used in the 70s when I was a kid, the New Orleans Saints were so bad that the fans started coming to the Superdome with bags on their head. And they called themselves the Aints instead of the Saints. This is true. Look it up.
This is what
literally,
the Cowboys are about to start
not
doing.
hundreds of fans, thousands of fans. I'm going to disregard the cowboy comment. Okay, not hundreds, but thousands of fans would show up with bags on their heads. And then Drew Brees got traded to the Saints, and they called him Breezes because he was the answer for them, and they just turned the franchise around, and they wound up winning the Super Bowl. And I remember when that happened, I was like, oh my gosh,
From the
anything
Aints to the
is
Saints.
truly possible if you can go from wearing bags on your head to winning a Super Bowl. So I've always kind of had a heart
Maybe the
for
Cowboys will
New
get there.
Orleans. Well,
Sorry, we're sitting next
can
to the
you stop?
Cowboys room, and sometimes the jokes are too good not to make.
Well, all right. You want to joke about the Cowboys? I sent this text to a friend of mine recently, and not to be negative, I love my Dallas Cowboys, but as far as this season goes, here's my comment. I would rather watch Bob Ross paint a cactus in the desert and tell me how peaceful it is than to watch the Cowboys play football this year.
Well, that's like us cheering for Texas over Auburn because Auburn's not fun to watch right now.
Oh, you're going to make some people mad.
No, but I'm just saying, on the grand scheme of things, my generation likes to take things out of proportion, right? They like to take them out of proportion. They like to stop using their brains a little bit and start thinking with their hearts a little bit. And sometimes you got to let that rationality kick in and say, guys, murder is wrong. But then they don't want to hear it because of this coddling of the American mind and things. And so I am sad that my generation is so divisive, so hateful, for a generation that's kind of branded itself on being loving and all of those things. That actually can be really hateful and really mean and things like that. And so I'm just really sad. And I also hope that, we all grow up a little bit in these next couple years, over these next, 4 years, things like that. Because I don't want to see a world where, all of our businesses are being run by people that are entering the workforce now, because it's just sad. And it just isn't, they take emotion into everything they do, and that's okay. But sometimes you need to set that aside and leave it at the door and just get the job done. And so
that's great insight, Eva. And I appreciate your comments because I think this another great episode. But I'm going to give you a verse because as you were talking, it just you said again, you've said a lot of key words this morning, but you said love. Your generation is the generation that kind of prides itself on being the love generation.
Kind of like the 70s.
Yeah, kind of like the 70s. But check this out. It reminded me of a verse that this. There's 7 verses that I like to pray over myself in the morning. It's part of my normal morning devotional routine. I've got 7 verses that I really, really like. And the last verse that I pray is out of the book of Colossians, and it's chapter 3, and it's verse 12. And so yesterday, as I was reading and actually praying that verse, it just hit me in a different way than it ever had. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to read the verse and then I'm going to give the commentary on it. Okay, here it is, 12 through 14. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, with kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with it. Hey, even if you're not a Christian, we always caveat our podcast. We know we've got some listeners that are not Christians, and that is totally okay. We're glad you guys are along for the ride. And so when I quote the Bible, if that doesn't resonate with you, totally okay. But I am asking you to listen to what it says, because there's some really good advice that it contains. And so check it out. This advice, verse 13, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, what virtues? The virtues we just talked about 2 verses back. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Over all of those virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity.
Yep.
Here's my thought. As I read that
I have
verse
one
yesterday,
too, so.
I thought, you know what? Anytime I sow discord, anytime I'm divisive, anytime I'm abrasive, anytime I really push back and I get in somebody's face, there is nothing loving about that. Now, I'm not talking about taking a stand. You can take a firm stand on the issues, on your morality, on your
Still love
ethics,
the people that
but
differ.
still love the people that do not agree with you. And so I'm going to say it again. Anytime we're abrasive, disruptive, and we push back on people really, really hard, that is not the context of this verse. I'm going to read it one more time. Over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity.
And you know what my generation has done? They've turned love into a weapon, right? They use the same word, but they've changed the definition of it entirely. And it no longer is a form of unity. It's a way to separate people. Well, you don't love us. Oh, you Christians always say, love others, but you clearly don't love us. All these things. They've turned it into a weapon. Is it straw man? They've straw manned the word love. And it's sad because it's supposed to be something that unifies us, but everybody has their own. There is no unified definition of it anymore, and it's become a weapon, and it's become a shield to hide behind. And so it's sad because it's no longer about reminding to love your neighbor as yourself and things. It's become you clearly don't love me if you do this or if you do that or things, and it's become a way to separate.
Wow. Eva, you might be the most mature 18-year-old I have ever met. I'm prejudiced. I know.
I was like,
You're not perfect. Neither am I. Sometimes I know you look at me and you're like, Dad, I don't even know how to respond to that. You're pretty sharp, kid. And
Thanks.
So I appreciate your viewpoints. I think you've brought a lot to the discussion today. Thanks for sharing that. And great episode.
Yes, great episode.
Yeah.
And let's remember, let's always be able to talk from
generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed our episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review because it helps people who don't know about us hear our message. And if you want to follow us on our socials, follow us at G2G_podcast on Instagram and Generation to Generation on Facebook.